Welcome to Autism Parenting Summit, brought to you by our sponsors. Platinum sponsors. Gut Brain Axis Therapeutics Incorporated. Gut Brain Axis Therapeutics is developing microbiota transplant therapy for treating gastrointestinal symptoms and autism symptoms. Hardy Nutritionals. For over 20 years, Hardy Nutritionals has helped people improve mental wellness naturally. Their research-backed micronutrient formulas are trusted by healthcare professionals worldwide to support mood, focus, and emotional resilience without the side effects of traditional treatments. Autism Treatment Center of America. At the Autism Treatment Center of America, we believe every child with autism has unlimited potential. Through our Sunrise program, we guide and empower families to connect, communicate, and inspire growth, transforming lives one joyful moment at a time. Innate Healthcare Institute. At Innate Healthcare Institute, we imagine a future where children with autism have access to the most advanced healing therapies available. Based in Scottsdale, Arizona, our clinic combines regenerative and integrative medicine to help unlock each child's fullest potential. North Florida Stem Cells. North Florida Stem Cells, led by Dr. Eric Weiss, is dedicated to providing innovative stem cell therapy for children with autism, helping families explore new possibilities for improved quality of life. Gold sponsors. Autism Parenting Magazine. Join a thriving community of families and unlock the potential of your child. Autism Learning Network. Join a community that understands. Unlock a wealth of resources. Access expert advice, practical tools, and shared wisdom.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the Autism Parenting Summit. My name is Mary, and I'll be your host for this session. I'm excited to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Leslie Blum, a passionate educator and a seasoned speech language pathologist with over 25 years of experience in supporting autistic individuals and their families. Dr. Blum is now the Assistant Professor of Communication Sciences and Disorders at the Eastern Michigan University, where she teaches courses on autism, early intervention, and child language disorders. Before joining the academia, she works hands-on in hospitals, clinics, and schools, always with a focus on helping children feel calm, connected, and understood. She brings deep knowledge and practical tools in a warm, supportive approach that empowers both professionals and parents. She is also the author of Practical Strategies for Supporting Emotional Regulation in Students with Autism, a guide filled with real-world techniques caregivers can use right away. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Leslie Blum.
All right. Today we're going to talk about communication strategies for difficult moments. I am, as Mary just explained to you, I'm Leslie Blum, and I am an assistant professor at Eastern Michigan University in Communication Sciences and Disorders. I have an educational doctorate in early childhood education, just so you know a little bit about me. I have a master's degree in speech language pathology, and I worked in the field as a clinician for over 25 years, always specializing in autism. And I worked in hospitals, private clinics, and the public schools, and spent about 10 years working in inclusive classrooms in preschools with children on the autism spectrum. And now I'm teaching future speech pathologists to do the same thing. So many of the things I'm going to share with you today, I've shared not only with parents when I worked in schools with preschoolers. I also shared that with my students who are going to be speech pathologists working with students in the schools. I did a lot of work throughout my career with families, including facilitating parent groups and doing a lot of home visits in the 3 to 5 age range, and really enjoyed supporting caregivers and families. So that's always been one of my favorite parts of my job. So I'm really excited to do this today. And I also believe that coaching families and coaching parents how to work with their kids at home and then the community is really, really beneficial and one of the best things for kids. I'm also the parent of 3 grown children, so 3 grown people who used to be children. And so I get parenting. I understand that part of it. So I'm going to share with you some of those same strategies. And so let's go ahead and just get started. The objectives for today, I want you to first understand when and why those difficult moments happen. I think you probably all know when the difficult moments are happening, but let's talk about some of the things, we'll talk about some of the things those moments have in common that may be more difficult for kids with autism, and then why. And then we're going to learn 3 strategies, communication strategies, and then a little bit about why those strategies will work to help get you and your child supported through more difficult moments in your day. I do this also with a speech language pathologist, and I've done helped people in the classroom, other colleagues in the classroom, to understand the why behind some of the strategies. Sometimes we learn strategies or learn ways of doing things, but we're not really sure why those things are working. So then it's hard to pivot and choose a different strategy if that's not working. If you understand a little bit of the why behind it, the research behind it, then you can pivot really easily and maybe try something different. So we'll talk about those things. And the real goal is for you to feel more calm and confident during those difficult moments, that you can support your child and you have some tricks in your bag to kind of pull out and try with your child. So those are our objectives. Moving on. So the agenda will be first to discuss those difficult moments, the when and the why, as I said. Then I'm going to do a little bit of a review and these are some questions that I went into in more depth in another autism parenting webinar that I did that you can go and look at. There are a number of things that in this presentation that kind of have to do with and coincide with those things in the other presentation. So that's available for you to look at as well. But I want to just review these 3 questions because these are things that you should ask preceding using the strategies. So the 3 questions you will want to ask if your child is becoming upset, or you think it's a time in the day that might be more difficult. You want to think about, have you provided enough processing time? And we'll talk about this a little bit more. How can you simplify your language? And then what can you do to provide more structure? And we'll talk about those. These are things that you can do, just these first questions to ask yourself when the moment is getting difficult. Have I done these things? So we'll review those, and then we'll go into learning the 3 strategies. The 3 strategies are going to be modeling, offering a choice, and adding visual support. And some of these at least, are things that you are already probably doing, that you've heard about or learned about before. These are nothing new. We're not reinventing the wheel, but I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the why. I'm going to give you some specific other things to think about as you're implementing these strategies, because sometimes it's not just the strategy implementation that's going to help, it's the way you implement it, and the different things that you offer as support. So we will go into those in a little bit more depth. Before we get started with those, I want to let you know that 3 times during the presentation, I'm going to ask you to pause and reflect on a difficult moment that you recently experienced with your child, and carry that throughout the presentation so that you can really be thinking of a specific situation and applying that in your mind. I'm doing that because research shows that as adults, particularly everyone, but as adults particularly, we learn best when we can learn about something that we're going to apply right away, and when we can envision and picture ourselves doing that. So I want to help kind of solidify this idea in your mind by having you do that. Okay. So difficult moments, let's talk about those first. I've got some pictures here. So what do I mean? What's happening when we're having those difficult moments during the day? What's happening is maybe your child is becoming what we call dysregulated, right? Regulation is probably a term that you've heard, and dysregulation means when a child is having difficulty coping, staying emotionally regulated, and coping with the everyday stress to be available for learning and interacting. So if your child is having difficulty coping, is not available then for that learning and interacting with you, and then that is maybe bumping up against things that you want or need to happen during your day, those things that just naturally need to happen. And then your anxiety starts to go up, and then that interaction gets difficult. And so that's what we're wanting to think about. So that thinking about that dysregulation that your child is having, that's really an outward expression of being overwhelmed with emotion. So whatever the emotion may be, it may be sadness, it may be anger, it may be anxiety very often. Then you're going to have that dysregulation, and that may look like angry outbursts. So we have these pictures here. So angry outbursts, meltdowns, like just a crying meltdown, like a kind of a shutdown. Can be a quiet shutdown, can be crying, melting to the floor. Or refusal, just like they're not doing this thing. so then that creates there's friction, right? Because maybe you need that done. So those are the things and that's what's happening. So if you if you want more information on regulation and dysregulation, I do talk about that in more depth in the other presentation. So feel free to take a look at that, as well as in my book, but we'll look at that at the end. I can show you where that is. So let's go ahead and move on to thinking about when. So we're talked about what's happening when those difficult moments are happening. Thinking about when, a lot of times probably pop into your mind really easily. That's going to be different for some kids, different for some families, different on different days, but you can think about when are those times that are more difficult for your family. So mealtime is one, and I've found some pictures on the left. You hope it'll look like this. You want everything to go smoothly, but sometimes it looks like this, and that just doesn't go smoothly at all. Bedtime, you hope it will look like this. Your child goes to bed, goes to sleep, is sleeping peacefully, and you have a little bit of time to regroup. Doesn't always look like that. Maybe that's a really hard time for your child or your family. Going out into the world, getting ready to go, going to school, doing errands, that kind of thing. You hope it's going to look like this. Your child puts on their backpack, they jump in the car, they're happy with whatever route you take. It's all good. But sometimes it looks like this, and that your child is overwhelmed with emotion, whatever the emotion may be, and it doesn't go smoothly. And then that can become hard. So thinking about that, those are just a few times in the day that tend to maybe be a little bit more difficult. And this is what I'm going to ask you to do: that first pause and reflect. I want you to do two things. So it may help to have a pencil and paper nearby. I actually should have said that earlier. So grab a pencil, a pen, a piece of paper, anything. Just needs to just scratch paper. And you can pause the video to do this, but I want you to do two things once you pause the video. I want you to first write down a few other situations, just jot those down, that seem to precede difficult moments in your family's daily routine. What things are those? And then the second, I want you to think of a specific time recently when you had a difficult moment. And just jot down some notes about that situation, because that's the one I'm going to have you come back to a couple more times during this video, so that you can kind of try to apply some of the principles we're talking about. So go ahead and do that. You can pause and then come on back when you're all done. Okay, so hopefully you had a little bit of time to jot some things down. So let's think about what other situations that you maybe thought of in your own family that might have those difficult moments to happen. Here I found some pictures for a few that are common ones that I've talked about with families. One is bath time, and that can be really a really rewarding and wonderful time for some children, and for other children that can be really hard. And sometimes that has to do with sensory sensitivities. It can have to do with all kinds of things, but bath time may be particularly hard. This one in the middle, I thought of times when a child is really attached to a certain object and needs to have that object, and it's lost, or they need to share it, or it gets broken, and that's really difficult. Another one is maybe shopping. You're trying to take your child out and get the shopping done, and they have certain ideas about how they want it to go, and you need to get certain things so that you can feed the family, and that can be really a difficult routine sometimes. Potty time, learning how to use the potty, that can be a time when there may be some difficult moments, some struggles. Again, going in the car, some kids have very specific ideas about certain routes they want you to take, and if you go a different way, that's upsetting. Or it's just too long in the car. They don't like the car at all. They want to go a certain place and you're not going that place today. So those car trips can be difficult. And then the other one I had was getting dressed. That can be more difficult. So thinking about some of those situations and some of the ones that you maybe wrote down, they might be different from these. Thinking about what is it about these situations that make them more difficult for kids with autism. For all kids, but specifically kids with autistic kids, that they may be harder, and we'll talk about why that is in a minute. One is that many of these are sensory, as I said about the bath time, are sensory heavy events. There is a lot of sensory input going on, be it auditory, tactile, the sound. What the sounds are a big one for kids with for autistic kids is, maybe there's too much sound, it's very overstimulating. So there's a lot of different things, and or getting stuck on a certain idea can make it difficult. So sensory heavy events, a lot of them can be, some of them can be can be unpredictable. So that can cause some anxiety. They may be non-preferred, like your child simply does not like this activity for whatever reason, and or it competes with a preferred activity. So it's not necessarily that this activity is not preferred. It's that it just is competing with one that is preferred. Like, I can't do that because I'm having to do this. I can't stay up and play with my toys because it's time to go to bed, that kind of thing. These are also situations when there are a lot of demands that are being placed. So you have certain things that you need to get done for the family during the day. And so you're needing in these situations to place a lot of demands. I need you to do this. Now I need you to do this. Now I need you to do this. And that can be difficult. There may be time pressure, and that's going to make your child's anxiety go up. There's often time pressure in these situations, right? You need to get it done by a certain time. We need to get to school at a certain time. We need to eat so that then nap time can take place. So sometimes that time pressure is going to add to the pressure in the situation, not just for your child, but also for you. And then as your anxiety starts going up, as things are not going smoothly, then that can escalate things on both sides. Yeah, like I said, it may be stressful for you. And often these things involve a transition. So changing from doing one thing to doing another thing, or being in one place to go to another place. And transitions are hard for autistic kids. They're hard for all of us, but they're hard for autistic kids because you have to change your idea about what's happening, especially if you're going from a preferred to a non-preferred. That is very hard. That flexibility is difficult. So the child, when all these things are happening, are trying to process the situation. They're trying to process their feelings about the situation, and they're trying to process the language that's coming in at the same time. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and we're going to talk with those 3 questions are about trying to mitigate those things to begin with. And we'll talk about that. So it can be overwhelming, increase the anxiety, and then there's the potential for that dysregulation to increase rather than decrease. So looking at, here's a list. I just wanted to make sure this is what we just talked about. The things that these kinds of times in the day have in common that may make them ripe for a difficult moment. Unpredictable and confusing, non-preferred, has triggering sensory elements, involves a transition, is stressful for you, and there's time pressure and or the pace is too fast, and you're having to put demands on your child. So those are some things that can make them difficult. We all can have difficulty regulating our emotions at times. That's part of being human. And for everyone, good thing to remember in any situation is you've probably all heard of HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If you or your child have any of those things going on, you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that's going to make any of these situations more difficult. Okay. So that's a good thing to remember. And autistic children may encounter additional factors that can make these things even more difficult to stay calm and flexible in certain situations. So let's look at what some of those things are. So for some autism characteristics that may also contribute to difficult moments are that difficulty regulating emotions, sometimes having inflexible learning styles. So there's different styles of learning, and sometimes we can be more flexible about how we learn or how we take in information. For autistic kids, that's usually a little bit less flexible. They learn in a certain way and they want to learn that way, or they need to learn that way rather. Difficulty with cognitive flexibility. Remember, I talked about the transitions when you're moving from one thing to another, one place to another. You have to make this cognitive shift in your mind. I'm playing with my Legos, and now it's time to brush teeth. I don't necessarily hate brushing teeth. I probably don't like it as much as playing Legos, but I need to. There's this one part of the process where I simply need to transition my mind to, okay, I'm stopping playing with the Legos and now I'm going to turn my attention to doing this. That cognitive flexibility is difficult for autistic kids, or can be. Difficulty processing sensory input, or just processing sensory input in a way that's different from other people, that may, and being more sensitive in some areas and having or being less sensitive in others, and taking in that sensory information in a different way can interrupt the regulation, staying regulated. Differences in interoception. So interoception is is like an eighth sense that we're learning a lot more about now, and that's your internal sensations. So knowing what's going on in your body, being able to feel when you're hungry, when you have to go to the bathroom, pain, those things, and being able to locate what's going on. Sometimes autistic kids may know. So, and kids are just learning this in general, right? And so if this is even a little bit more difficult, it may be difficult to know, like, something's not comfortable in my body, but I'm not quite sure what it is. And so that makes it really hard to stay regulated. If you can't locate what's uncomfortable, like, I don't know if I'm hungry, or I have to go to the bathroom, or I'm having pain, and then not being able to, having maybe communicative difficulty, not being able to communicate that. So that's the next thing on the list, actually, social communicative difficulty. And these are all, the next three are all have to do with communication. Social communicative difficulty, possibly difficulty with language comprehension for some kids, and or difficulty communicating to others, and using language or gestures or whatever. Processing speed may be slower in kids in autistic kids. So if things are happening fast, remember I said I talked about the pace. If things are happening really quickly, sometimes they need to, but that can cause that dysregulation for them, because that's not matching the way their speed of processing and understanding. So those are some of the things particularly about autistic kids, that may contribute to these difficult situations that you have, difficult moments. So what can you do? One thing that when you're in the middle of a difficult moment, when you see one on the horizon, what are the things you can do? So this is going to be the meat of our presentation today. So you cannot change the child's behavior. I mean, I know we've all tried. You can't actually change the child's behavior, but you can change your own behavior. That's really the only person's behavior that you can change. However, what you do can have a huge impact on how the whole situation goes for you and for your child. So take heart. So the strategies that follow are going to help ease those difficult moments. They won't prevent them. They won't make them disappear. Those are going to happen. That's part of life. And they're going to help to ease those situations, maybe help them happen less often, help you know how to feel calm and confident that you have the tools to support your child through that, so that it's easier on them and on you. Okay. So let's look at, remember I said we were going to review the three questions that I really go into for more in my book and in the other presentation. We're going to review those here because you'll want to think about those before applying the other strategies we're going to talk about. So looking at those, the three questions, as I said before, have I provided enough processing time? How can I simplify my language? And what can I do to provide more structure? So here they are. So the first one is providing more processing time. So autistic children typically need more processing time than their peers. That means more time to understand what you've said and internalize it and figure out how they're going to respond. So what you can do, and this is true when they're especially true when they're dysregulated or becoming dysregulated. So in those difficult moments, that processing time is especially important because, as we said, trying to process the situation, their feelings about the situation, the shift in expectations, and the language all at once, right? So that can be overwhelming, causing an increase in anxiety and that potential for upset. So if you think about yourself, when you feel rushed to do something that's unfamiliar, non-preferred, challenging, I always think about exercising, and think about how your anxiety might increase, especially if you have to do it quickly, right? Your anxiety increases, and think about how frustrating it is when you're just about to get it and someone else jumps in and gives you the answer or tells you what to do. And so think about that, how that feels for you. And you are an adult with good emotional regulation skills and the ability to the wisdom to be able to see that situation within the context of your wider life. So your child does not have that, right? Especially the autistic children who may have particular difficulty with some of these things. So what you can do is wait. You've asked your child to do something, told them what's coming next, whatever. You're going to wait. You're going to give them time to process. You're probably going to wait longer than's comfortable for you. You don't want to wait so long that they wandered off and done something else and forgotten what you've said, and you'll learn how to gauge that. But you need to wait longer than you would normally for the child to do it. It takes time to learn that, but I think you will be amazed with the results. And what it does is it gives your child the time to process language and the emotions, and it ensures that your child gets to do the thinking for themselves, right? And that's what you want them to be doing. And that's what kind of decreases prompt dependency. Sometimes autistic kids can become what's called prompt dependent. And that means they're waiting for somebody because frequently, because the processing time is a little bit longer, people think they don't know how to do it. So meaning, right? All of us do it, jump in too early, tell them how to do it. And so then they come to expect that if they just wait, someone's going to tell them what to do. And they don't need to do that thinking. If you wait a little bit longer, not only does it increase that regulation, or the likelihood that that child will stay regulated, you also give them the chance to do that thinking for themselves. And that's where learning happens. So you very much want that to happen. So the wait time, you may want to count silently to yourself. You want to watch your child and gauge how much time they're going to need. And you'll get to know that. And that may change in different situations. That may change depending on if they're tired and hungry. That's going to become intuitive for you. But giving that wait time is really important. So that's the first one. That was the first question. How can I give enough processing time? The next one is using simple, direct language to give a clear message. So you want your child to have a really clear message about what it is you need them to do, or what the expectation is. I'm a speech language pathologist, so I am all for talking to your children a lot, giving them a lot of language models, practicing conversations. That all is very important. And when they're dysregulated or becoming dysregulated, or it's one of those moments that's traditionally a difficult moment in your family, simplifying language is going to help, because remember, the child is processing all those things. They're processing the situation. They're processing whatever you've asked them to do. They're processing their feelings about it. And you don't want to put a whole lot of language on top of that, because then they have to process that too. And that may be difficult for them. So that's going to cause a lot more anxiety and dysregulation. So this is also something that takes some practice. It's really, really natural for us as adults who want to help, especially you want to help your child, right? That's all you want to do when they're feeling upset or dysregulated. You want to help them. And the way we tend to do that is try to talk them through the situation. So yeah, they don't want to brush their teeth, and you're like, come on, we're just going to brush our teeth. Here's your toothbrush, put the toothpaste on. Okay, put it under the water. And you're giving them all this language, and they're still trying to process how they feel about this transition. So what you want to do is state it, and remember you're going to tell them if you need them to do them. You are going to tell them rather than asking. Don't say, do you want to brush your teeth if it's time to brush teeth, because you don't want them to, you're not giving a choice at that time. And then they might say no, and then you're in a pickle, right? So you're going to tell them time to brush your teeth. And you're going to state it simply and be precise, or first brush your teeth, then book. That's, you can use a first then to do that. Sorry, my phone rang. So you're going to state it simply and clearly, be precise, slow your rate, and use pauses and vocal stress to emphasize the important words so that they get the message really clearly. And then wait. That's the time when you're going to do that wait, to give them time to process it. Maybe you have, and we're going to talk about structures and visuals later, but maybe you have their toothbrush in your hand. You've taken it into the other room, say, or you might say 2 more minutes, then brush teeth, and you're holding the toothbrush so they can see that, but you stop talking and let them process. Oh, and they may still get upset, but they're going to start to learn, giving that time for them to process that thing is happening next, and they're going to need to kind of shift over, and you've got the object that they can look at, and that helps them remember that. That's going to help, especially over time as they learn those expectations. So giving them that heads up. With the simple language that supports the language comprehension, that helps them to understand it better. It also helps your child focus on those essential parts of your message, rather than giving them lots and lots and lots of language to try to talk them through that moment. Okay, so kind of backing off, making language simple and direct, and then adding in that, and that really goes hand in hand with the processing time. You're going to provide that processing time, and you're going to look. You want to develop a nice expectant look. So 2 more minutes, and then you can kind of look and have that expectant look, and that can help. Okay, so that's the second one. So you're providing the processing time. You're asking about, have I provided processing time? Have I used simple enough language, or could I simplify that some? And then the last one is adding the structure that really makes the expectations and the procedure, the process that you're going to go through clear. So with the structure, the child will know what to do and what to expect. That makes anxiety go down. Think about yourself again in a situation where it's unfamiliar, or you're not really sure how to do something. If you have something that shows you what the steps are, or tells you what the steps are, that makes our anxiety go down, right? So that's what you're doing for your child. You're giving them more structure. Unstructured times can be particularly difficult for autistic kids. Like at school, recess time is often, for a lot of kids, that's great. It's like free time to run around. But for autistic kids, sometimes that's more difficult, because because there's no structure to the time, and the expectations aren't clear. So sometimes adding structure in situations like that can really help. What you can do is add structure, either visually or verbally or both. And some of those things I already gave you examples, like first then is a verbal way, first this, then that, of structuring the situation. That's a verbal way. And you can also use a visual with a first then. A visual, and another visual way, remember I said bringing that toothbrush along when you're saying that, talking about preparing for that transition to toothbrushing, that's another way to visually structure the situation. So think about, have I added enough structure? How could I structure the situation? Creating routines with your child is a great way to do that. Giving your child a role in the routine can really help them. They're then involved with it, right? Giving them as many roles as possible when they're doing toothbrushing. There's, in this picture, you can see the mom's giving the child, it looks like they're cooking together outside. She's giving him a role. He's squirting the squirt bottle. So giving your child, what can your child be doing? I'm going to give you a reference later on for Autism Navigator. If you go to some of their webinars, they'll talk about giving the child a role. That's where this all comes from. It's fantastically helpful. That can help your child really stay regulated and engaged with you, and that will bring a lot of more opportunities for communication. How it helps, your child understands the process if there's structure and they know what to do. It also increases their independence and can decrease anxiety. Okay, so those are the 3 things you're wanting. Those are the 3 questions you're wanting to ask. So here's the second pause and reflect. So I want you to think about that difficult moment that you envisioned, that you jotted down on your paper. Think about that time, And think about how did you provide enough processing time, or how could you think about like the next time that happens? Likely the one that happened might happen again in a similar situation. So next time you did it, try it. Can you provide more processing time? And at what points might you do that? That would be really helpful for your child. How could you simplify your language or your message during that time to help with that? How could you add more structure? So I want you to think through those. Pause your video, do that, and then come on back when you're done. Okay. Welcome back. Hopefully you thought we're able to apply those. Now we're going to talk about we're going to get into the 3 new strategies that you would use. You'd ask those 3 questions first in a moment when your child's getting dysregulated, or when you're getting prepared for a moment that's traditionally a difficult moment in your family. Think through those 3 questions, and then here are some additional things that you can try. So the first strategy is modeling. So when I talk about modeling, I'm talking about demonstrating. What I mean is demonstrating what you want your child to do, or calling the child's attention to someone else who is doing what you want or need them to do. So, and it seems really obvious, but it's profoundly important. We want to teach them that they can look to other people to know how to do things. So, one thing that goes with autism is autistic kids can tend to be more object oriented than typical learners. So, this means they may be more focused on objects in the environment than on the people and what the people are doing in the environment, and or internal states, sometimes more focused on internal states than what the people are doing in the environment. For you and I, it might be really, really natural when we don't know how to do something to watch other people to see how to do it. I know I do it all the time. If I don't know how to do something and I'm feeling anxious and I know my turn is going to come, or I know I'm going to need to do that thing, I am watching other people who have done it before to see what they're doing. So that is, sorry, I have to move this. Okay. So that is, can be really natural for many people. For autistic kids, sometimes that's not as natural. It's their head may be down concentrating on objects, and maybe not knowing that not having learned yet that they can watch other people to see what to do. So you want to teach them this. So this is a really important learning moment, in addition to helping with potential difficult moments in your day. So one example will be like getting out the door. So that was one time when we identified that might be more difficult. So if you could simply point to if they need to get their shoes on to go out the door, point to their shoes and point, we're going out now, and point to the door, shoes on. Really simple language, gesture, talking about that. You could say, if you wanted to use yourself as the model, I'm getting my shoes on so we can get in the car. And maybe they look at you, rather than saying, put your shoes on, you're saying, oh, look, I'm getting my shoes on, and you're putting yours on, and you maybe point the child's and look expectant. See if they'll start getting theirs on, or letting you help them put them on, whatever stage they are in that particular skill. You could also use a sibling as a model. So-and-so's, so like Abby's getting her shoes on, Daddy is getting his shoes on, and then pause and wait. It seems like it's really similar to saying, put your shoes on, but it's actually like really different, because the child is learning to watch other people. And that's what you want them to do. Like, say when they get into school and it's time to line up at the door, rather than them playing while the other kids are lining up and they're playing over here until somebody says, go line up, and then they go line up. That if they're looking up and looking around and seeing what the other kids are doing, and then going and doing it. So this is a stair step to that ability to think, what do I need to do next? It leaves room for them to do that thinking for themselves, right? If you say, I'm getting my shoes on, Daddy's getting his shoes on, Abby's getting her shoes on, we're going to get in the car, and you pause and wait, and you maybe look at their shoes and point, but you don't say anything yet. It gives them the space to think through that a little bit more. Oh, everybody's getting their shoes on. I should get my shoes on too so we can go. So it's leaving that space for them to do a little thinking and that learning about watching other people. It also is going to decrease the direct demands in that situation that can be a difficult moment. So it may go more smoothly as well. Yeah, so providing that wait time. Let me see if there's anything I forgot here. Yep. Okay, so it helps them learn to watch and then decreases that anxiety. So how this helps, shows the child what to do, teaches your child to watch other people for cues about what to do, increases successful completion of that target task or behavior, and increases that predictability. And again, it decreases anxiety. So modeling, that's our first strategy. Modeling it, do it yourself or pointing out someone else who's doing it. Okay, our next strategy is offering a choice. This is probably something that you've heard before, something that you've done. I want to give you some additional things to think about in terms of offering a choice. What you can do is offer your child a choice in order to mitigate the difficult moment, right? When you are offering a choice, you want to present only 2 options. You don't want to give too much information, too many choices, right? That's a lot to process. And then that decision making can become anxiety producing. 2 choices, and they both need to be okay with whatever your agenda is. So if the agenda is to get shoes on and get out the door, your choice, whatever choice you give them, it needs to accomplish that, whatever choice they make. And then try some different types of choices. I'm going to expand your thinking, I think, a little bit on different kinds of choices that you can offer. We'll look at that on the next slide. So what happens is, how it helps is that it empowers your child. It feels a little bit, it's less like a direct demand. It also gives them some agency, right? They are able to make a choice. They feel like they have some power, and they do. It also is teaching them how to make choices. You want your child to learn as they get older how to make their own choices. That increases their agency, and you're really going to want them to have that as they become older. It structures the interaction, right? That adds that structure we were talking about, and it can help your child disengage from their own agenda when they're stuck. So here's an example. I'm sure you probably all don't need an example. You probably had this happen. But so there was a little boy one time that was in my preschool class, and kids were going home. His babysitter came to pick him up, and he would not put his jacket on. It was Colorado, and it was snowing outside, and she wanted him to have his jacket on. And so he was really digging his heels in, and he said he didn't want to put the jacket on, and she didn't know what to do. And she kind of looked at me like, I don't know what to do. So I kneeled down in front of him and I said, really simply, Jack, time to put your jacket on. Do you want to put the left arm in first or the right arm? And I looked expectant and just paused and waited. And he kind of looked confused for a little bit. And then he said, right arm. And I said, okay, great. And I put that one on. I said, okay, time for your left arm. And put that on. And I said, ooh, we need to zip it. Do you want to zip it? Do you want me to do it? He said, I'll do it. And he zipped it up, and then I said, okay, hood on or off. And he put the hood on, and they walked away, and he kind of looked confused as they walked away, but he was in the jacket. It kind of gave him some choices, some agency, but also kind of broke him out of that stuckness that he was in, where he was digging his heels in about not putting the jacket on. Now that might not work the next day. You might have to use a different strategy the next day, or it might. But it seemed like magic at the moment. I mean, the babysitter looked at me like I had worked some magic, but giving those choices really can help with that. So that's a good example of that. It gets the job done while not placing that direct demand on the child, and structures the interaction. All right, so that's the second one, offering a choice. Let's talk about some different kinds of choices that you can offer. So a lot of times we get, well, looking at this slide, we think of giving a choice between 2 objects. So for the getting the shoes on example, you could give a choice of, do you want to wear your sandals or your sneakers, right? So you can do that. Or we want to give a choice of 2 different events, which you can't really do. Well, you could say, do you want jacket first or shoes? So you could do something like that. But you really have to stick within this one event because you need that to happen, right? So here are some ways that you can do that. So there's some different kinds of choices you could do. Positioning. Do you want to see in this picture here? See in one picture, mom's putting shoes on with the child sitting down. The other one, she's tying the shoes with the child standing up. So you could say, do you want to stand up or sit down? Or you could do a question related to timing. Do you want to put your shoes on? This one works really nicely. I've used it a lot. Do you want to do that now or in 1 minute? So it's going to be time to brush your teeth. It's time to brush your teeth. Do you want to do it now or in 1 minute? Sometimes, even if the child is kind of digging their heels in and doesn't want to do something, and you say the now in 1 minute, sometimes they'll just say now and do it. And having the choice was enough. It's mysterious, but it's true. Sometimes often they'll say 1 minute, especially if they kind of are starting to understand that concept. And you say, great, okay, 1 more minute, then shoes on, 1 more minute, then brush teeth, and you're going to put a timer on. So you're going to use it. You can use a sand timer like this one. You can use those little sand timers. I've got some big sand timers that kids love. You can use a time timer. You can use your cell phone, anything, and give the child some agency in it. If you're using your cell phone, let them turn the alarm off and say, okay, time to brush teeth, and then they can go and do it. So timing is really good. That's also a really good one for sharing. If the child has siblings and there's a toy that they need to share, and that's really hard, you can say, if your autistic child's using something and your other child wants a turn and there's some difficulty there, you can say, it's so-and-so's turn, Abby's turn to use the truck. Do you want to give it to her now or in 1 minute? And that gives your child that time to process that change, to process that thing that they're not really super excited about doing, which is sharing. And it may still be hard to hand it over when it's time, but it's going to be less hard. There probably may be some dysregulation, but maybe it'll be less intense. Maybe it'll be shorter. And as that expectation happens, and you'll do it the other way as well, so that they can see sometimes they want something their sibling has, and that sharing is going to happen that way. But it gives a heads up and time to process the emotions. So good timing now or in 1 minute. Location. Where do you want to do that? You need them to get their shoes on, but do you care if they sit on the bench or on the floor or by the front door or the back door? You can give a choice based on location. You can give a choice based on assistance. Do you want to do that together or by yourself? And that's a lot different than saying, like, sometimes we get frustrated in those frustrated moments and we say, just, oh, forget it, I'll just do it. That's different than giving that choice and saying, do you want to do it together or by yourself? And that gives them that choice. So those are some different kinds of choices that you can start to think of. Sometimes it's helpful for parents to maybe write these different things down: positioning, timing, location, assistance, and stick that up around some different places on a little sticky note until you kind of get used to doing it. So that when you're coming up on a difficult moment, you want to give a choice, and you're kind of grasping for what kind of choice can I give? That'll be helpful. So that's the choice making. So far we did modeling and offering a choice. We talked about those kind of a little bit more expansive way. And the third one is adding visual support. And this is a really good way to add structure. There are different kinds of visual supports. When we think of visual supports, we often think of pictures with Velcro and different kinds of visual supports that you might see in a classroom or at school. You may be using those at home. That's great. That's one type of visual support, and we'll talk about that. Other things that are visual supports are gestures and facial expressions. So those are visual supports that go along with language, but can help make language clear. So really, and make your meaning clear. So really exaggerating those things can help be a support in themselves, a visual support in themselves. So I just wanted to talk about this on this slide because in this picture, it's a really nice example. Say this child was having difficulty with that, or parents had anticipated it may be difficult for the child to hand over a present to somebody else because they may, kids like presents and they may not understand the whole process of gift giving. So maybe they're anticipating that might be difficult. And look, grandma here is making it a lot easier by using a gesture and a facial expression to show her expectation that he's going to give her that, right? So she's holding out her hand, and so that gesture shows that is making that give easier. So that's a gesture. And she's also, you can see on her face, she's got that expectant, excited, but expectant look, like you're going to give that to me. That's that expectant look, and kids learn what that means. So those are some things that you can do to support kids, to provide a visual support that's easy and quick. So here, what you can do, you can use yourself, that gesture or facial expression we're just talking about. You can use items in the environment, signs that are already existing there, stop signs, that kind of thing, objects that are already in the environment, and people. So here's an example. This is more like something that you'd see at a school, but these are objects in the environment that are already there, that they're using to help structure the situation, to make it clearer what the expectations are. So each child has their own basket, their jackets hanging in the same place, their shoes are there. I'm sure there's some homes that are not very many, I think, but some homes that are maybe very structured like that, where there's a place for each person's things. Great. I'm not saying you need to do this with your entryway. I'm just saying this is a way that there's something already in the environment, and that's being used to structure or provide visual support. So there's that. And then there are specifically created tools. So you're creating those tools to help somebody in a situation, a child, an autistic child, whomever, and something like a first then visual or a choice board. And we'll look at some examples of those. So what visual supports do of all of these kinds is provide structure and predictability. They support communication, both understanding and expression. So they can, and I'll point some different ones out. This one here, the cubbies or whatever, that's really supporting comprehension of the situation. What am I expected to do, right? It's not helping the child to communicate more. It's really looking at that expectation. It shows the child what to do, what to expect, and what happens next. So it doesn't have to be explained. So gestures and facial expressions, like I said, can be great visual supports. They are, you should remember that they are transient, like spoken language. So spoken language, one reason visual supports are so helpful is that spoken language, once we say something, it's gone. So if it takes you longer to process something, it takes you longer to process that language and that message, and it's gone, that's going to make it harder. If it stays there in front of you, it gives you a longer time to process it. And that's one reason visual supports are so effective for a lot of people, and especially for autistic children. That gives them that more time to process that. Gestures and facial expressions are visual supports, but they also go away as like spoken language as soon as you say them. So just a thing to remember. It's still great to use them. Use of objects and pictures allow the student to continue to process while it's there in front of them. Okay. So looking at, again, here are some types of, there's some similarity to the last slide, but I thought this was helpful, especially with the visual on the picture on it. So body language, facial expression, gestures, proximity, eye gaze, what you're looking at, natural environment cues, furniture arrangement, signs, cubbies, traditional tools for organization and giving information, calendars, written instructions, shopping lists. So you can see we all are using visual supports all the time, right? I can't go to the store without a shopping list, or I will forget something. Specifically designed tools, those are the ones that are uniquely designed to accomplish an identified need. So like this one here, this is a first then. So remember I talked about that first. So this one would be first book, then play. You could have first shoes on, then go to the park. You could have you can replace these pictures with anything that's helpful. This is a really good basic visual to have available at home. You can write, I've done it before where I grabbed a piece of paper and drew two squares and then wrote first and then. And you have to teach this to the child. At first, they're not going to know what this means. But as you keep doing it, they're going to understand it. They're going to start to understand it. And you can have them have a role in it by, you say, maybe say first book, then play. So then you read the book, or maybe first book, then bed. But After you read the book, you can have the child take the book icon off, or if it's on a piece of paper, cross off the book or something like that, giving them a role in that. So that's a first then visual support. And that would be one, again, for comprehension to help them understand the situation, right? Okay, so so here's how it helps. Visual supports help support language comprehension, like that one we just saw, and expression and communication. So their ability to communicate. Different kinds of visual supports do different things, right? It allows for processing time. It stays there. It adds structure so your child knows what to expect. They can see what's going on and what's going to happen. It capitalizes on visual processing strengths. A lot of autistic kids have a relative strength in visual processing, the visual mode to understand their environment. So this really capitalizes on that. It increases their independence, because if they can navigate the world a little bit more smoothly, because they can see what's expected, or they can communicate with you using that visual, then that increases their independence. This is, and just to talk about this visual is what we call a choice board. This looks like it's right on the family's refrigerator and has some of her favorite snacks. So if she's not able to communicate that verbally, she can go up and point on the refrigerator to what she wants, and then her parents know. So that is supporting her expressive communication, her ability to communicate with others. So that's another kind of visual support that is designed to help with a communication problem or something that's happening in the environment. And using that can help ease those difficult moments, because the child not only understands what's happening, but also may be able to communicate. Okay. So let's look next. So those are the 3 strategies. We talked about modeling, offering a choice, and adding visuals. I want you to go through and think about, one more time, your last pause and reflect. Think about that difficult moment that you remembered, and think about, how could I model that behavior or call my child's attention to someone else who is completing that behavior in a non-judgmental way. You're just stating facts. It's not in a judgmental way. Offering a choice. What kinds of choices could you offer in that situation that would be okay? Thinking about them ahead of time really helps in that moment when things start to get a little hairy. You can pull that choice out, and you know it right away. Add gestures or facial expression. How can you add those to your communication? Remember, you're already thinking about those 3 questions, so you're already providing more processing time and simpler language. How could you add some facial expressions and gestures to that to really make the expectation easier to understand? And then adding a picture, an object, or other visual tool. So to structure the environment, you could do something like, to structure what they need to do. You don't have to have a whole visual schedule created with pictures and stuff. You can line up the objects. So that helps the child understand what to expect. Pajama top, pajama bottoms, toothbrush, book. And then they can see, oh, I'm going to do that, then that, then that, and then that. And you just put the objects out. That's a great way to start, especially for kids that may not understand the pictures yet, but for anybody. That just helps structure that moment for them. Okay, so go ahead and pause and reflect. Think about how modeling, offering a choice, or adding a visual could help with your difficult moment that you thought of. Okay, and then come on back when you're done. Okay, so we have gotten through everything. We started out with talking about when and why difficult moments happen, what those moments have in common that can make them really a little bit more challenging during your day. We reviewed those 3 questions that you could ask, like, have I provided enough processing time? How can I simplify my language? What can I do to provide more structure? So those are the first things you're going to think about. If you don't get to these other 3 strategies, that's okay. Just think about the questions first. And you can start adding these in, and there are a lot more strategies that you can learn as well. Yeah, we reviewed the 3 questions. Then we learned the communication strategies that can help ease the difficult moments and why they might be helpful. I hope that you'll try them out. I think you'll see that they can help ease those moments within your day, and that at least they will add to your confidence and your ease with the situation, thinking that you have some things that you can do to make it easier, a little bit easier, and support your child through it. The objectives for today were to understand when and why those difficult moments happen. I think we hit on those. Learn those 3 communication strategies and why they work. And then hopefully as you try them and you go home and you try some of these strategies, you will feel a little bit more calm and confident during these moments. There's some final tips and takeaways here. These, so modeling, remember, you're going to model the behavior yourself, or you're going to or point out someone else who's doing it for your child. Offer a choice. Remember you're just going to offer 2 choices, and think broadly about the potential choices. You could present different objects, change the task a little bit, and then there's location, timing, position, and level of assistance, those things that we talked about. And then adding visual support. Facial expressions and body placement and gestures are very helpful, and things that pictures and objects, how can you use those to help your child process it, because those stay there and give them more time to process. Okay, here are the references. You're welcome to take a look at those. I also have some parent resources here. Autism Navigator, Autism Research Institute, Practical AAC has some really nice visual support information for parents and professionals. The STAR Institute for Sensory Processing is a great website for looking at sensory processing for kids with autism. We're going to do some questions. I've got my little owl there. We're going to do a couple of questions in a minute, I think. I will put this up at the end here so you can see. But okay, terrific.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn, for the wonderful presentation. We've learned a lot. Not only, it doesn't only apply for autistic children, but parents in general, right?
Yeah.
Can learn from
Yes.
your presentation.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
oftentimes people would think children not doing something is like bad behavior, right? It's easy to associate that, but what if the child doesn't know what to do? So providing them options, communicating, properly and in a positive way, and offering them choices is actually a good strategy in order for them to follow. So thank you so
Yeah,
much for that.
absolutely. It helps. I mean, it helps with everybody. You're right. Not just kids either, right?
Exactly.
It helps with everybody.
Exactly. I can completely relate with, sometimes you're anxious and you don't know what to do. So as an adult, you tend to scram, and it's the presentation is for everybody. So thank you so much for that.
Sure,
But
of course.
we do have questions from our parents. These are very personal to them, very easy situations, but sometimes they get stuck. So first question is, for example, I have a child having difficulty during bath time, right? So
Mhm.
how might you use these strategies given that situation? And can you give some examples? It probably has worked with other families that you've already worked with before.
Yeah, so and that's a time when that can be really hard. So especially if there's some sensory that's overwhelming to the sensory system, the bath time might. So I would think first we want to think about that processing time for if you know that's going to be a difficult time. So start thinking about that first. Give them a heads up. Again, 2 more minutes, then bath time, or if we're going to finish dinner, then it's going to be bath time, and maybe something visual, a rubber ducky, something that they like to have in the bath, some sort of an object that they can see there that reminds them that bath time is happening, and then they can carry it. And that becomes then what we call a transition object. It can make it easier to get into the bathroom where the bathtub is, because they've got that object in their hand and they're thinking about that rather than about where they're going, and it kind of gets them maybe across the threshold sometimes. So I would do that, and then obviously, just like I said, keeping that language simple, right? 2 more minutes, then this is happening, or first this, then that. That would be a really good way, and then structuring it. Having a routine, you could lay things out once you get into the bathtub, and give them part of that routine. If they have a certain toy they like, that, can be their job to put that toy in the tub, or maybe they get to choose 3 toys so make a routine out of it. They know that once they get in the bathroom, they're going to get to choose their 3 favorite toys and put those in the bath, and then turn the water on, and then you're going to plug the tub, and so everybody takes a role, and it also becomes a routine. So that can show them what to expect, right? Then you're gonna you could, if you wanted to use modeling, right? We talked about modeling. You could have if you have a sibling, if that the sibling's getting in the bathtub, you could say, Jack's already in the bathtub, your turn, that kind of thing. And so that could help. As far as giving a choice, you could ask, do you want to turn the water on, or do you want me to? So giving some of those choices, again, within the realm of the agenda is we are taking a bath right now, but how, you have some agency in how we do that. Do you want to get in yourself, or do you want me to help you? That kind of thing. And then having a visual, like I said, the visual objects out, or if you have a visual schedule, that's great. Either way is totally fine. So that's how I would use some of those things for bath time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
What if what if a parent says, I did try that strategy, it didn't work? What if with a person asks that?
Yeah.
What are the strategies that you can,
so that's an excellent question. So the first thing I would say is, and then I have said to a lot of parents and also colleagues that I work with, because I did a lot of training of people in the class, other professionals in the classroom to work with autistic kids, and that is something that happens all the time. Like, I had a boss, one of my mentors, who's used to say, if you're, don't worry about it. If you tried something and it didn't work, and the child is still melting down, and it really escalated, and it just didn't work at all, it's completely typical. So don't beat yourself up about it. And you kind of learn to, like, okay, I tried that, it didn't work. Which is one reason that you want to kind of have a bank of strategies. And that's what I've taught to other colleagues and parents. Like, you want a kind of a bucket of strategies, because sometimes one's going to work and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it'll work in one situation, but you need something else in another situation, and you're going to try these different things. And if it doesn't work, you try the next thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. And
So in this book, in my book, there's a whole bunch of strategies. We talked about 3 of them. There's a bunch in this. This is a book that I wrote with my colleague, who's an early childhood special educator. She and I wrote this together about strategies that we used in the classroom together. And we did that because we couldn't find anything where it gave a number of strategies like that. We found things where there was one strategy that went really deep on that, but parents and professionals need a lot so you have a lot of things to pull from. And also, we couldn't find anything that gave strategies, but also there were some books that gave a bunch of strategies, but didn't talk about why they worked. So then our colleagues didn't have the information about why that worked, so that then they didn't know. They'd try one strategy and it wouldn't work, and they wouldn't know where to go from there, because they're like, that's the strategy I knew. And that was what I was hoping would work. But if you understand why it might be difficult for autistic kids to stay regulated, and why it might work to do some of these things, then it makes it much easier. Then you have the background knowledge to figure out what's something else I could try. And so I think I would say that's most important. But the most important thing is to start with, like, take a breath. If it didn't work, take a breath. You're going to try it a different way next. Sometimes it just takes the same strategy. You're just going to try it a slightly different way. Maybe you're going to offer a different kind of choice, right? Maybe your child will be less tired next time. So it's moment to moment. You don't know, but don't beat yourself up about it. You're just going to try something different next time. I know that's harder in the day-to-day of being a parent. I do understand that. And it's harder when it's your child that's upset. But generally that's true.
Yeah, that's right. You already mentioned the word. You mentioned the word regulated or regulation. We've obviously heard that term before. Can you explain why it's so important?
Yeah. So it is really, really kind of is a skill that really underlies a lot of what we all do all day long. We all need to stay available for learning and interacting, and able to, monitor our emotions. We all have emotions that change all the time throughout our day, and we have to figure out how to manage those. Of course, all children are still learning how to do that, right? It's hard to manage emotions. And some adults are still really learning how to do that. We all do that to different abilities all through our lives, but that really is, so if you think about it, one of my mentors said, taught us to think about it as a tree, which I've always found really helpful. So if you have a tree, the roots would be the emotional regulation. So that's really underlying everything. And then you have the trunk is kind of like you're doing these things together, you're together in these activities. And then the leaves are all those other things that you're trying to get to in terms of like being able to communicate well, learning strategies or learning things at home, imitation, any of those goals that you might have for kids, things that you want them to do, being able to get through the daily routine. Those are all up in the leaves here. So you can't really get to these things if the regulation's not there. So that's really the basis. So that's where you're really concentrated. And what's really happening when you're having a difficult moment is your child is dysregulated. They're whatever emotion they're having is overwhelming in that moment, and they don't know how to manage it. And that's bumping up against what you need to happen to get your day done, right? And so and then maybe you're becoming dysregulated as well. So that's why regulation is so important to be able to get through those moments. Does that make sense?
Yes, and your strategy is actually giving the children more independence because you're giving them choices, right? Giving them two options so that it doesn't, put them into a situation where they need to think a lot, and that's really, really helpful. If there is one thing that you want to relay to parents, or want to give them advice, or one message that, out of the presentation that you gave today, what would it be? What's your advice for parents?
That's a good one. I would say, I think, just to reiterate, just take a deep breath and kind of try to step back a little bit when you're in one of those difficult moments, and and I think realize that if it doesn't go the way you had intended, it's not on you. I would expect it usually, just be pleasantly surprised when it works the first time. But I think understanding and knowing a bank of strategies, and realizing that, okay, that didn't work that time. I think I can try a different one next time, or maybe I'll try it a different way. Just having those strategies. But yeah, just realize that if it's not going exactly the way you planned, that's okay. That happens often.
Thank you so much, Ms. Long, for sharing your time, your insights, and your experiences with us today. And we truly appreciate the valuable tools and perspectives that you've offered to us and our parents. And to everyone watching, thank you for joining us for this session of the Autism Parenting Summit. And we're so glad that we could be here. Be sure to check the Autism Parenting Summit agenda. We have many more inspiring presentations and interviews coming up for the individuals in the spectrum and leading experts in the field. And we hope to see you in the next session. Thank you, Ms. Blow. We appreciate you being
so
here
much.
today.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.